Hey guys, Ryan Maifield here, and I'm building a YZ-2 DTM3 for A Main Hobbies, and I got to the diff, figured might as well do a little bit of a video showing you how I build my diffs, go over a couple key parts, and well, not parts, but key things I do while building, key things I look for while building a diff. So yeah, A Main's doing a giveaway. This is the car I'm building. Got to the diff portion of the build. So yeah, just show you guys a little bit. So pan down here, I got the diff laid out on this rag. I've already gone and motor sprayed off the out drives to get any machining oil or packaging oil off. You want these to look nice and dull, so the oil that can't disrupt the grease or anything you're using on these. Same with your rings. Motor spray these off, and I lightly motor spray the balls, kind of rubbed them around on this rag. So I've already done that just to save a little bit of time in the video. I also use the RM2 heavy metal black grease for my thrust assembly, and the RM2 clear diff grease for the diff balls and rings. So yeah, let's get to it. So obviously there's a few things that everybody knows to do. A lot of guys that are going to watch this video have built a diff before. So might be a few things you see here that you typically don't do. So I always put a little bit of grease down in this groove underneath the rings. Just wrap it around with my finger, kind of fill that in. Bring any of the excess, major excess off. I'll use that on the other one, on the other out drive, just so these rings aren't rubbing on metal to metal. Don't want that happening. So yeah, move that around a little bit, and then you can go ahead and pop your diff ring on. And when you put the grease down there, it definitely helps hold them in place when you're trying to assemble this guy. Okay. So next, in these gears, there is a bigger opening and a smaller opening. So you want to pop the ball into the bigger opening. It's kind of hard not to, just by looking, it's hard to tell which side, but you'll find out pretty quick when you're putting the balls in. So got lucky there. I was on the right side. So just obviously set all these balls in place. Probably could have done this beforehand too to save a little bit of time, but oh well. Okay, so obviously this gear holds them in place on the one side. If you flip this thing over, they're all gonna pop out. So you're gonna need to put grease there anyways. So take a little more clear diff lube, run it around on the inside here. You don't need a whole lot, just a nice even coating. Try to make sure every ball has grease on it, kind of pressed into the balls as well. Kind of like that. And now when you flip it over, balls won't fall out. You can grease the other side. Okay, so that's really the only grease I'm going to use. I'm not going to put any more grease. There's a nice coating all over around these balls, and that's all you need. You don't need a ton of diff lube in these things because you're really just going to press it all out when you assemble it. So I'm done using the diff lube. I'll pop this guy on the gear. I don't press it down super hard because you don't want to pop the balls out. So just set it on there lightly. And the other thing that I typically do, grab a pair of pliers, is before I put the spring in. I'll compress it a few times with a pair of pliers just to kind of wake the spring up and get it to take its shape. If you do this, basically what you'll find is the diff will maintain its tautness. It won't change as much. A diff always kind of loosens up as you run it, especially when they're new. But when I do this, it doesn't do it as bad. So something I was taught to do a long time ago, and that's definitely a valuable tip. So pop everything in there. That side's ready. Okay, so for your thrust assembly, this is probably one of the more important parts of the diff, or this is the most important part of the diff. This needs to be assembled with the proper amount of grease, the correct grease, and with the correct amount of balls. The Yokomo diffs come with 9 thrust balls, and you only need to run 8. They include an extra ball just in case you lose one. They're pretty small, so it's kind of considerate of them to do that. Funny fact though, I built my diffs with all 9 balls for like the first year I ran for Yokomo because I didn't know that until Shin Adachi kind of taught me otherwise. So, RM heavy metal black grease. If I can get the cap open. I use this grease for a range of things, including my thrust assemblies. So, take a little bit of grease. I run it around that first washer, and I try to get it nice and even around here, bringing it down on the O-ring. There's an O-ring that goes on this screw to kind of prevent dirt. I'll bring a little bit down on that O-ring too, so it's all nice and lubed up. And then we start popping these balls in. Kind of helps when you have a little bit of grease on your fingertip to pick these things up. I know it's probably pretty hard to see what's going on here, but you get the idea. Okay, got them all on there. Kind of just lightly pressing them in, making sure they're good and even, spread out nice. Take your other washer, pop it on, and at this point I will kind of pinch the washer with my finger and slowly bring it to the grease. If you just jam it on there, it's going to try to push the balls out of there. So I'll just slowly bring it down like this, spin the screw, and keep kind of making sure those balls are staying in between the washers until that top washer gets all the way down. It's going to be bringing a little bit of extra grease off, which is fine. And then right there, kind of see it, pretty decent thrust assembly. Okay, so another fun fact about these diffs is it is a flathead on this thrust screw, but a 2mm hex wrench does fit in this, so you can use either your 2mm or your flathead, which is kind of handy. So pop this thing together. If I can find the hole. Okay, now the other tip I wanted to give you guys was when you first put these two pieces together, the two outdrives together, one major mistake people make is they try to tighten the diff down all the way right now. That's a mistake. That's how you can break the thrust screw, because you're trying to compress the grease that's inside the diff ball and diff ring area, and there's not really anywhere for that to go except out. So all you're going to do is press all the grease out of there that you want to be spun around and equally distributed with inside the diff, and it can also put strain on your diff screw and potentially break it later on while you're driving, or sometimes it'll just break right here in your hand. So when I tighten these diffs, and this is relevant for all 10 scale diffs, I will, as I'm tightening it, put a little pressure and then rotate it around some, a little more pressure. And all I'm gonna do is tighten it till I can't pull them apart. So I can pull it apart a little bit more. So right there, it won't come apart as I'm pulling it. It is extremely loose, but it will stay together and nothing can move or shift, and I can get it into the car. And once it's in the car, then I will start the break-in process. And then it's very loose still, so you're gonna probably have to do big swings at tightening it, as you break it in. But if you start with it like this, you won't put any stress, and like I said, the grease will get to where it needs to be inside the diff. So the other thing I do is this T-nut on the end. It's probably a little bit of a flange there. So at this point, I'll use my X-Acto blade and clean that off so the bearings fit over nicely. And that's how I build my diff. Hopefully that was informative for some. I guess the other tip I'll give is when I put this in, I will also use the clear diff lube on the internal gears. I'll put a little lap of grease on my diff gear here, and that will distribute the grease through the top shaft and the idler gear. It helps with preventing wear, obviously, on these plastic gears, and it keeps the car a lot quieter. The reason I use the clear grease instead of the black grease is if potentially this grease does get into your diff ball and ring area, it won't cause any problems. If you use black grease and it gets into your diff ball and diff ring area, those two greases combined can make a pretty bad, situation for your balls and your diff rings. So that's it. That's how I build my diff. Couple tricks there. Hopefully you guys can find that helpful, and hopefully we see you guys racing soon. Thanks.